Hey, what's up? Zach here, and today I've got the all-new Jordan Zion 3, and there are a lot of pros and cons to this shoe, mainly if you're used to previous Zion models, the 1 and the 2s. These are quite a departure. Whether that's a good or a bad thing is going to be up to you. Let's get into them. Now, starting off in the uppers, there is a ton of reinforcement on them, even though in some areas it doesn't look like it. You have pretty much 3 layers of reinforcement throughout the uppers of the Zions. Now, the main body of the uppers is just an incredibly tight textile weave. If you look at it on the breathability tests, they did heat up 104.2 degrees. But if you look at the airflow mapping, really the only place that was getting any egress of air was kind of on the corners of the tongue where the gussets stop, basically, where that elastic stops, right, on the proximal end of the gusset. Now, you do get an incredibly thick padded tongue out of that, which is fantastic. And around the ankle collar, you get an incredible lockdown. As you can see, the bunting and padding around that ankle collar is really second to none. The heel slippage on these was virtually none, even for a shoe this low topped, right, this minimalist in the heel. So Jordan did get a lot out of a minimalist shoe, especially in terms of containment, because like I said, you have the TPU that comes up over that, synthetic leather that comes up over that textile. So even though from some angles this shoe doesn't look like there's much in the uppers, there is quite a bit of reinforcement, especially where you need it around that ankle collar. As you can see on the inside too, incredibly thick heel counter on these. So really it's strategic placement of reinforcement, not necessarily just all around the shoe. The one other thing I do really like about the Zion 3's uppers is how the lace lines are offset a little bit, and they are all reinforced with TPU around there. It really gives a rugged and aggressive lockdown on these. Now, speaking of that, if you look at the upper durability test, 10-second tie grid sandpaper, the burr just starts ripping right through the uppers. There's really no drag guard. There's really no anything in the toe cap. So yeah, the rubber is pretty thick right there, and you do have a medial flange, which does protect that a little bit, because when you are pushing off medial, that medial flange is taking up a lot of kind of that trauma, right, when you're pushing off. But if you are someone that gets a lot of eversion, especially on outdoor courts, I'd be ready for these to start looking a little rough. Getting into the midsole of the Zion 3, this was the part of this shoe, as well as the Nike KD16, that I really didn't understand. The old Zions, the 1 and the 2s, I thought just served such a great niche in the basketball market, especially with, different formulations of Air Strobel in there. And then seeing it in the KD16, I'm thinking it's not gonna show up in the Zion line, and lo and behold, they put a drop-in midsole. Now, the interesting or kind of odd part is there is a shank on the drop-in midsole, but it is incredibly flexible. And then there is a pretty chunky Zoom Air unit there on that drop-in. The thing about that is for a shank to really do anything, it's got to be attached to a stable base, like a Strobel board. Same thing with a Zoom Air unit. If you really want a lot of performance out of Zoom Air, it really has to have something to deliver all of that potential energy into kinetic energy, right? It has to be able to deliver it into something stable, right, to give more of that bounce effect. So what I found is, I guess if you just look at the bounce height test on these, got 36.5 in the heel and then 44 in the forefoot. I still contend that Formula 23 this year and going into 2024, I still think they did something to it. It is much more performance driven in every shoe it's in. So I do like the formulation of Formula 23. I also like how that kind of mud colorway, this is supposed to all be mud up here, that does continue into the drop-ins. So you do get a higher coefficient of friction down there, so your foot's not moving around on that. You don't have to wear like gripper socks on this or anything. You're gonna be held in just fine. It's just that I think the trappings of this drop-in don't necessarily translate into performance. I think it more translates into, I'd say, comfort for certain foot types, but I just wouldn't expect that crazy feeling of bounce in these that you would with the same setup on a midsole that actually has everything attached to it. I think in terms of real performance on foot, I think it'd be just the same if it were just the full bed of Formula 23. How that goes for different people of different weights is yet to be seen throughout kind of the lifespan of this shoe throughout the year. Now, the outsole tread of the Zion 3 is by far my favorite part of the shoe. I think there's a lot to love here. You do get a harder rubber here in the heel going all the way up into the midfoot. In this colorway, it is more the translucent rubber. And then the dyed rubber here in the forefoot is quite a bit softer. And you can tell just when you have it on, as well as just when you feel it in your fingers, as well as with a durometer. Now, to me, this pattern grips pretty well after about 5-10 minutes of rubber warming on the floor, it definitely has a much better grip in the forefoot versus the rear foot. That soft rubber does contact and does interact with a hardwood court really intimately, really nice. As well as on outdoor courts, even slick painted courts and cold temperatures, these do really well. I think that's because that harder rubber on the outside of the periphery of the shoe, that kind of does a little bit better on those outdoor courts. But I think the thing that gives it the most stability is the lateral flange, and this thing's got 2 lateral flanges. It's got one in the forefoot, and then it has a midfoot flange, which makes this so incredibly stable, even for a shoe as streamlined and as narrow it is, which we'll get to in the fit section. But suffice to say, you know, when I got it out of the box, I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking that flange better be really strong to be able to keep this shoe from wavering. And in terms of, especially a drop-in shoe, a more narrow shoe, more streamlined shoe, these are about as stable as you can get, and it's all from that lateral flange being rubber on the midfoot as well as the forefoot. So no matter where you're pivoting on the court, this thing has you covered. Especially, like I said, in the upper section, you also get a medial flange on these. So the outsole tread is, I think, doing most of the work in this shoe, and all the performance you're getting out of this mostly comes from that outsole tread. And so if you look at it on the speed ratio, comes in at a 2.67, which is, you know, pretty darn good for, you know, the weight of this shoe, what it can do. I will say these do squeak a lot. They are not the most flexible shoes out there. So when you first put them on, they are a little bit harder to get off the blocks. I mean, you actually do get a little bit more of a diving board effect at first, because that does break down, right? Because it is a drop-in midsole, and that shank isn't so stiff. So it kind of delivers different speed from when you first get them, when they're just stiff and kind of boing, you know, springy, versus later on when they just become a little more, you know, a little more form-fitting to your foot, and you can actually, you know, move a little bit easier. But speaking of all that movement, if you look at the outsole durability test, 10 seconds, highest grit sandpaper, I mean, yeah, the forefoot rubber, that softer rubber, the burr just starts going right through it. It's at least a millimeter of damage, maybe a little bit more. The translucent rubber, even though the durometer isn't so high, I mean, it just barely got a millimeter of damage. So it is in the rear foot of the shoe, so it's not going to get as pummeled as the forefoot. But I would say if you're looking for these for any bit of longevity, I would be keeping these on indoor hardwood or rubberized courts. All right, but looking at the fit of the Zion 3s, this is a little more straightforward than some other shoes. A narrow foot can go true to size. A medium, I would be going up a half size. A 2E and a 4E, I'm just not sure this is a match, right? I don't think these are really going to fit well. Even after many uses of these, my foot was still cramping in them. It just did not go away. It's just the shape of the shoe, right? And plus, you've got all this TPU reinforcement on the medial and lateral side, which is great for containment, but for a foot that is any bit wide, has any lumps and bumps, whatever, there's just really no expansion. There is just no accommodation there. So I'd say these are a great narrow foot shoe, because you can get them, you know, standard size, and I think you can really get some performance out of them. But anything, even like, you know, just a true medium foot is going to have a little bit of issues with these. You don't go up a half size. And if you go up too high on these, especially with the drop in, where the Zoom Air unit is, it's just going to start to feel weird. So I would say if you are a narrow foot or even a medium at up a half size, these are going to be really nice feeling underfoot, especially in the forefoot. I'd say for anything forefoot pain, these are great. And if you're looking for a narrow shoe, more streamlined shoe for ankle sprain protection, especially with a drop in, these are really fantastic. I think they rival the Way of Wades in terms of their stability side to side. Maybe a little bit better, especially with this lateral flange here on the midfoot. So I'd say at least right on par with them. It's just they don't have the forgiveness that those shoes do either. So it's just really something you got to look out for. And I think it's really kind of going to divide the people that are going to want them versus just can't wear them. So if you're going to talk about the performance and playability of the Zion 3s, you really have to go back and talk about the 1s and the 2s, which I really feel just filled a gap in the market so well, just so neatly, right? And the Zion 3 to me just doesn't really fill that gap in the market, right? The feel of them in the midsole does not really feel like the 1s and the 2s. I really feel like they took a lot of the midsole stuff, put it in the KD 16, which is fine and it feels nice in the KD line, but I kind of wanted to continue with, you know, what the KD felt like in the 14s and the 15s especially. Not that it feels bad, it's just that I would have liked to have seen it stay in the Zion line. I just feel like the people that really like the 1s and the 2s and the performance they gave, especially more of that, you know, real rugged, containing, maximalist shoe, was still, you know, a little bit of pop to it. I don't know if they're gonna find that same feeling in the 3s. These are much more of a, I'd say, speedy performance first drop-in midsole shoe. They still feel bottom heavy, and for me, these actually felt heavier the more I played in them. Now that's because my foot was cramping like crazy in them as I was playing with them, but when I first put them on, they felt, you know, pretty springy, pretty lively, and then as I kept playing them, I just felt like they just really were starting to weigh me down more and more. And at the same time I was playing in these, I was playing in the Curry 11, did not have that issue whatsoever in those. So I think if you're the right foot type, if you're a narrow foot or a medium foot, and you like that feeling the drop in, especially if you want a really nimble shoe with a lot of stability on it, then I think you're really gonna like these. It's just that I think the people that liked the 1s and the 2s, for what the 1s and the 2s were, I don't know if you're going to love the 3s. I think it's just a little bit of a different market. I think there's going to be some crossover, especially maybe larger power forwards, small forwards, just, you know, shooting guards, point guards. They just want something a little bit more, you know, shifty and nimble, right? You know, something that doesn't have a lot of bulk in them, but something that has kind of the same side-to-side stability. You're really going to like. To me, the bounce and the hop in these just didn't kind of fit with, you know, all the trappings and all the bells and whistles on them. I felt like they did a lot for comfort right underfoot, but not so much for, you know, performance. So like I said, I think that there's going to be some people that this is going to be their #1 shoe this year for sure. I think other people are just going to try to go back and get old colorways of the 1s and the 2s on sale. I think for me, I just miss the feeling of the Zion 1s and 2s because I personally loved them so much. But like I said, with how well Formula 23 is playing right now, and how, you know, the feeling underfoot of it is really nice. I think there's gonna be a lot of players that like it. You just have to be, I think, that person that wants a little bit more of that streamlined shoe with that side-to-side stability. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Zion 3, especially because I think these are gonna divide the market so much. I really think these are gonna be a Jekyll and Hyde, love or hate. So I'd love to know kind of what your opinion of these has been, and if you've liked the direction that Jordan Brand is going with the Zion line, especially in this line, because like I said, it's quite a leap. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you want to see another Jordan Brand shoe that I think has really improved from model year over model year, the Jordan 38 going to the knife, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.